presenting the Rubin construction history. Um, as you know, it's been an eventful year, given the COVID that we've all been working through. Work on the site for Rubin construction in Chile officially stopped on March 23rd of 2020. Unfortunately, that occurred before we had been able to complete fully enclosing the dome. The construction or the reassembly of the telescope mount assembly had only been partially complete. So we had to take some special precautions to ensure that we could protect the partial telescope mount assembly from the approaching Chilean winter weather. Over the winter months, we remained shut down. However, we did send limited crews up the mountain roughly once per week to inspect the site and maintain those protective measures. As the COVID crisis began to wane, we did receive official approval to resume work on the site on September 28th. That started with our internal crew, but the dome contractor team, which is Italian, returned from Italy in October, and we were able to get the telescope mount assembly contractor team back from Spain in late January of 2021, and we've been operating more or less continuously since then. We also, of course, had to suspend work on the camera, which is occurring at SLAC National Laboratory in California. There we were shut down for about 3 months, and then we were enabled to return to the site with limited personnel and reduced efficiency, and we've been operating in that mode ever since. Of course, most of the broad Rubin construction team have been working remotely over the full COVID period, and for many, the remote working has been compatible with their job responsibilities, so that's proceeded unabated. So the impacts, nevertheless, have been quite considerable from COVID, and it's resulted in what we now project to be more than a full year's delay to the expected completion. However, the pandemic itself is not considered by NSF, or by either agency for that matter, to be an event which we could have reasonably anticipated, and therefore would appropriate contingency funding to. So with that determination, funding the delay is not an appropriate use of contingency. It would have also exhausted our contingency. And so we were advised that we needed to replan the project when we had enough information about how COVID would play out to do so. And that's what we've been engaged in seriously over the past few months. So we'll submit that replan formally to NSF at the beginning of June of 2021. And there'll be a formal review of that plan by NSF and DOE, which is now set for June 15th through 17th. The final costs are not completely worked out yet, but it appears to be on the order of about $50 million impact for NSF to fund the replan. For the DOE project, we were able to do something a little bit different. We could justify an early closure of the formal project, which is called a major item of equipment project, based on the verification of key performance parameters at the subcomponent level. And this allowed us to minimize the COVID impact, to complete that project actually ahead of time and within the cost guidelines despite COVID. Now, that leaves remaining work in assembling the camera at SLAC, shipping it to Chile, and integrating on the telescope. And that work is now funded under commissioning, which is part of DOE operations. So, of course, that DOE operations budget has grown as well because of the delays. But DOE's been working with us to amend the funding profile accordingly. So let me just go through some few slides about progress and what we're doing. Of course, we've taken extensive protection measures for COVID. We have a COVID protection plan in place. We have had 3 confirmed cases on site. each initial case had one additional case associated with it, with someone that had been working closely. We have been using the appropriate personal protection equipment and other aspects to reduce further infection. We do have a formal COVID tested program, which started in mid-February, as indicated. Weekly, everyone who goes up to the site is administered an antigen test, and if they test positive, that's followed with a full PCR test. We have a full-time on-site nurse, good response from the team. In fact, that testing program identified one of the individuals who was asymptomatic and subsequently was confirmed with PCR. And then very recently, we've introduced contact tracing, which is an electronic system that can identify anybody that an affected individual may have been in contact with. And we'll see how that works. They've been using that at Space Telescope with success, and we'll be implementing it on them. So although the COVID conditions in Chile are not good, we do have a plan. We have the processes and tools in place to keep workers safe and to keep the summit open as long as possible. Okay, I'm going to run quickly through some slides. You'll have these in your deck showing you what the system looks like, or the facility looks like at this stage. You can see the telescope mount has been, the big pieces have all been assembled. In fact, we mounted the top end ring just a few weeks ago, and that was a major event for the completion. You can also see that the dome has been largely enclosed at this stage. There's some additional cladding that needs to be put in place, but we did finally achieve a closed dome situation as the next Chilean winter approaches. This is just a potpourri of some of the additional work on the summit. You can see the M2 hexapod, the device that holds the secondary mirror, as well as a number of other things. On the camera side, essentially all of the camera hardware has been fabricated and delivered. The only final thing we're waiting for are the last 2 filters. We've received 4 of the 6 final filters fully coated. Here you can see different aspects of the camera. The full 3.2 gigapixel focal plane is shown at the lower right. Elements of the camera body, filter exchange system, etc. The filter progress is progressing. This will be the final item that will allow us to close the major item of equipment project. In this slide, you see the assembly hall, the clean room at SLAC, the U-band filter as delivered, which looks quite nice, and we've also been doing a lot of work at preparing to ship the camera to Chile. On the data management side, that work has proceeded largely unimpeded because everybody can work effectively at home. There have been a number of achievements over the last few months, which are just listed here. I won't go through them individually, but you can see we're making excellent progress toward our construction completion on data management side. And one of the things that we've been doing is processing data from the auxiliary telescope, which, if you recall, is a calibration facility located very close to the main Rubin Observatory summit facility. So this telescope is used to acquire spectra of bright stars in the Rubin field, and we use those spectra to diagnose the atmospheric attenuation. And as you can see, the data system is working there. We're acquiring data now and analyzing those data, and that's all working well. In terms of the system integration and test and the commissioning, the early integration efforts are going well. The commissioning camera has been delivered to the site and is operating on level 3 of the facility. That central image shows an image actually taken with a commissioning camera. All the sensors are working beautifully. And we have a refrigeration pathfinder unit, which is also in Chile and which is preparing to be turned on very soon. A lot of progress has been made by the education and public outreach team. We've developed a new Sky Viewer web app, which is a fun, intuitive tool for the public to explore and play around with Rubin data. And we've developed these initial prototypes and had them reviewed by consultants who are experts in science education for understanding how useful they will be by a broad public audience. So this is the schedule of where we are. There's a lot of detail here which I won't go through. You can look at it yourself. We're showing early completion of the full system now in August of 2023. We haven't determined exactly what our scheduled contingency will need to be, but we're expecting it to be of order 5 to 6 months. So we're looking at the start of operations in something like February of 2024. For your enjoyment, we've also prepared a number of online resources at the website listed here, and we encourage you to look through that in connection with this meeting. So that webpage includes information about our new logo, visual identity information, some new videos that we've made, relevant news items, and various other pieces of information about Rubin. So let me summarize. It's been a trying year for everybody, of course. The delays have been disheartening, but the project morale remains high, and a tremendous amount of work has indeed been accomplished. Both federal agencies have been tremendously supportive, and they've worked closely with us to minimize the cost impacts. The replan process is in full swing. While there are still significant remaining COVID risks, we believe we're on track to complete the project and begin operations in early FY24. Okay, now let me turn it over to Jim Yek, who will cover the AMCR report. Jim?
Thanks, Steve. Right, so this is a very brief update on the activities of the Aura Management Council for the Rubin Observatory, as we call it, the AMCR. I'm Jim Yek, the chair of that committee. Next slide, please. And also a reminder on the mandate oversees the Rubin Observatory Construction Project Office. And we have regular meetings, couple times a year or more if needed. Thanks. Next. Also the members, so it's about 12 folks who bring in a variety of experiences that are all relevant to the construction project and the preparations for the transition into operations. Thanks. Next, yeah. So our perspective, just a couple slides, and you just heard about this, but there's a very strong coordinated management response to the COVID-19 pandemic with personnel safety as a top priority. And the team has been able to accomplish work under very difficult circumstances. Construction work resumed on the observatory site after a shutdown. And contractors from Europe are mobilized to the site to work on the dome and the telescope. And at the time of our last meeting, which was in January, there were about 20 Rubin staff and 40 contractors on site, which has increased since then. There's good coordination between the construction project and the operations team to support the transition of personnel. And so the AMCR commends the team on the impressive technical progress made during these very difficult times. The plans for construction project rebaseline is a consequence of the COVID-19 pandemic. There will be a baseline change that has been prepared, and as Steve mentioned, will be moving forward for review and approval by the NSF. The camera refrigeration system, where the panel the committee has recommended, in addition to the current efforts, to look at ways to develop plans for improving the confidence and the long-term reliability of the system, which is something they're doing. That's recommending something that they're planning. And then also starting to consider planning for extended shutdowns during operations. And we're looking for an update at that at our next meeting, and we'll coordinate this with the Oversight Committee for Operations as well. And so that's all I have to present. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jim.